Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 166. I'm really excited for today's episode just because this is a guy who's been cool to see him work his way up the college coaching ranks. Started out close to us and now is doing some amazing things in the SEC with his athletes there. And it's been awesome to see just how he's evolved as a coach and been open-minded to all of the new training initiatives and tech initiatives and things like that so that he can offer the absolute best product to his players. We have a really good discussion, not just about developing pitchers, but also about how the pitching coach role has evolved, but also how the game of college baseball has really evolved in light of the transfer portal and the NIL deals and a lot of the other variables that have gotten thrown in over the last few years. So this is a great episode with an absolutely great guy. I'm looking forward to it. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition happen on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest is the pitching and associate head coach for the University of Alabama. As an interim head coach in 2023, he led the team to a 13-6 record with 3 consecutive series wins during the final month of the regular season. The Crimson Tide went on to win 2 games in the SEC tournament to earn an NCAA regional host bid, the program's first since 2006. Alabama was crowned regional champions with 3 straight victories in Tuscaloosa and secured a berth in a super regional, Alabama's first since 2014. Previously, he served as the pitching coach for Florida Atlantic University from 2009 through 2016. During that time, FAU had 14 pitchers selected in the MLB draft. Prior to that role, he'd served in pitching coach roles for South Alabama, Mercer, and North Florida Community College. He attended Florida State University, where he earned his bachelor's degree in physical education and later earned his master's degree in sports administration. Please welcome to the show, Jason Jackson. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know this is a really, really busy time with camps and recruiting and surely family dynamics and all that stuff that makes the summers kind of squeeze these days. So appreciate you carving out some time to chat.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm a big fan of the show. I listen a lot. And so it's kind of a who's who with your guest list. So
well,
I'm
you're in good company
flattered to be asked to be on. Yeah.
You know, you're in good company. It's well earned. So, hey, I know we've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about, but for those who have been living under a rock in the baseball world, maybe let's talk a little bit about your background. Is, what was the path to coaching? I know you've had, several stops along the way.
How did you initially make the transition? We were all athletes at one point and decided that it was time to move on to it. What drew you to coaching, and what was the process?
I kind of grew up around coaching. My dad coached me when I was growing up. My uncle was, one of my high school coaches, and I was in that dugout when I was as a little kid, just kind of being the bat boy, and always looked up to the coaches, and I saw the impact that they had on me and on the other players, and so it was kind of something I always had probably on my mind, that I wanted to do. I was never a great player, and so as my career kind of winded down, I got to play some JUCO ball, and
Mhm.
it, you know, I knew I wanted to coach. If I could go back and talk to myself back then, I'd probably tell myself to, play, go wherever you got to go to play a little bit more. But I knew I wanted to coach, and so I kind of got right into coaching. As soon as I was done, and I finished up my master's. So I played a couple years of JUCO ball, and then I went to FSU, and I finished up, got my bachelor's degree there. And as I was finishing my master's degree, um, I got a chance to coach at a local junior college,
Mhm.
right outside of Tallahassee. And, I didn't really know, there is no blueprint,
Yeah.
for the coaching career, right? You just it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, I say. And so you kind of take some opportunities or you leave them and you see where that takes you. But this one was great for me. The guy that was the head coach there, is, still a huge mentor of mine. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he had been a long time scout, cross checker. And, just for some family reasons, he needed to be closer to home. And so he was kind of overqualified for that job, I feel like. And, it's kind of a unique situation. For the 2 years I was there, we had about a 45-minute drive to the office every day, and we rode together every day. He would pick me up and we would ride together, and he had this old Volvo and the radio didn't work, and we talked baseball for the whole ride. And he'd just tell me good stories about the scouting days and the cross-checking days, and when he got to manage in the minor leagues. And I really learned a side of the game that I never got to do because I never got to play pro ball. And so I kind of got to learn that side of the game. And he was tied in with some really good guys, and that kind of helped me out along the way and kind of getting my feet wet in coaching. And so I did that, not knowing where it was going to lead. And then from there, I caught a break and I got my first Division I job at Mercer University. But so I guess to answer the question, I know I get long winded, but I sort of always had coaching on the brain. I didn't know what it was going to look like, if it was going to be, you know, teaching and coaching in high school or coaching in college. When I got my shot to do it in college, the recruiting stuff, was kind of something that I had a knack for. And I really enjoyed that side of it. And I enjoyed working with maybe the higher level player. And like I said, you just take it and you run with it.
That's awesome. I think you nailed something that probably really gets overlooked. I had a conversation with a younger guy in the industry who kind of is more of an acquaintance, and he was like, can you let me know if there are any ACC or SEC jobs that open up? I'm like, you haven't had a job, let alone like one of those jobs. Like a big part of this industry is like you got to go and you got to fall flat on your face. You've got to struggle. You've got to like rack your brain at the end of a long day for what you didn't figure out. And I even joke about like fail forward. Like go
Right, right.
somewhere where you can fail without consequences. You can't do that in the ACC or the SEC or the big leagues or anything like that. Those early formative years are huge, especially if you have a really good mentor that's willing to give you the time.
No doubt, no doubt. And believe me, I had my fair share of those fail forwards, I think, kind of coming up. But that's how you learn everything, right? And,
Yeah.
I had my fair share of scrubbing pants and, dragging
Mhm.
the field and watering mounds and fixing mounds. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of that stuff it kind of builds who you are, right?
Yeah. And you're building bandwidth too. Like I don't think people probably realize. I mean, obviously you're not just a pitching coach. You've been an interim head coach, you're an associate, you've done the recruiting coordinator side of things. Like this isn't just work with pitchers. There's budgeting, there's travel. Your
Yeah.
bandwidth, has it grown over the course of years just as you've taken on more responsibilities?
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing that I probably love, not probably, I do love the most is just the actual pitching side of things, right? But that's just one hat, and this time of year the guys are off and they're playing summer ball or they're at home, and so you kind of switch gears. And I think it is kind of one thing that I do enjoy about the job, though, is there's always different seasons, right? There's always different, like you get to the fall and like you're really working on developing and getting to know your guys, and you're in the trenches. And that's when you're kind of building their arsenal and you're changing some things here and there, or, you're just getting to know the new guys. And that's when you're building your team, is in the fall, right? And then you get to the winter, right? You get to November, December, January. Those are times I love. Like that's a good time for us to learn as coaches. There's all kind
Yeah.
of good, different learning opportunities, and there's different conventions and things like that. So that's a great time for that. And then you get to the spring and now it's go time, right? And now it's time to play and you're going hard, for that whole season and you're focused on winning games and, trying to make a run in the postseason. Then you get to the summer. Now you switch gears again and you put your recruiting hat back on, so, it never gets monotonous. There's always something new to do.
It's amazing. You actually hinted at my next question, the recruiting side of things. You got camps going on, I know, in Alabama right now. I know you, with the NIL stuff and the transfer portal and all that, you kind of have to go through like almost a re-recruiting all the time. But I'm curious, you probably get dozens of emails every single day that come in. As you talk about the recruiting process, what are the biggest mistakes that you see high school players and definitely parents making in their outreach? Do you have certain pet peeves that drive you bonkers as you just go through the sheer volume of kids that would love to play for the Crimson Tide?
I mean, recruiting's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard on kids and parents, and I try to always give them the benefit of the doubt because there's so much that goes into that. And it's a really stressful time for them. And some handle it better than others, right? Like there's some that just handle it perfect. And I tell them like, man, you've been a total pro with this whole thing. And, and then there's some that, you feel like, hey, this guy might be a little overbearing or this mom might be a little bit of a hover, but like, I get it. I mean, I might be the same way. I don't know. My son's 8 years old, and if he's fortunate enough to get recruited down the road, or or one of my daughters, then I might be the same way. I don't know. But and you know what? I'll tell you this. I kind of learned it because I've watched friends of mine that are in the industry, right? That actually do this as a profession, and when their kids have gone through it, they even get to that point where they're kind of like a little, So it happens to everybody, even people that are in it. But I think the rules always change. It's really hard. It's really stressful. Some people handle it better than others. And so I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think some things that maybe jump out are like when you get the emails. I like the emails that come from the kids, right? I don't like it as much when the parent is writing the email on their son's behalf. Let them reach out, and the same thing with the calls, right? I'd rather speak to the kids, more so than the parents. I think there's definitely a time for the parents to get involved. They need to set the guardrails and they need to make sure things are going the right way. But I also think that it's good to let the kid, let the prospect handle a lot of it, right? Because they're going to be the ones living it, and I think sometimes parents get excited and they like to live through it, and so, try to enjoy it. Try not to get too stressed out about it. Whenever you're making the decision and you've made the decision, I tell like, hey, we've all heard no before. Just call us and tell us when, nobody's going to yell and scream, I don't like the, finding out on Twitter or, getting a text message because, these coaches have spent a lot of time getting to know you and spending time talking to you. So just, hey, if you're going to go a different direction, call us and tell us. So, I mean, I guess those little things maybe, but honestly, it's really, I think parents as a whole do a really good job of managing that because it is a stressful time.
That's awesome. I mean, do you think there when you think about it, are there questions that kids have asked you that have stood out as well? This is like a forward-thinking, mature kid. Like, obviously, you're interviewing them to see if they're a good fit. Like, could this kid thrive in Alabama if he's from Minnesota? Is it the right academic fit? All these different things. But, they're interviewing you to some degree to make sure this is where they want to spend the next, 3 to 4 years of their life. Have there been like things that they've asked that have surprised you in a good way?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell when you're talking to some of the players like, hey, this guy's really kind of mature beyond his years, and you can tell sometimes they put some thought into it, right? And they've kind of wrote out some things that they want to ask you whenever they talk to you on the phone. But yeah, I think I like when they ask more about the pitching side of things, right? Like, hey, tell me what a day in the life's like, right? Or tell me kind of what my yearly calendar would look like. What does my weekly routine look like? How do you set up our weekly throwing schedule? What are some of the technology things that we're using there? More so than, the general questions of like, how big is the locker room? And, our football game's cool, things like that, which is all good stuff too. But, I like the guys that are really kind of invested in their development. And they want to talk pitching because the one thing I tell guys all the time, is everybody has great coaches and everybody has great facilities, especially you go through our league and there's great coaches everywhere. Everybody's got great stuff. I don't think you're going to go anywhere that you're like, man, this place is terrible. Everybody does a good job, but I think until you really sit down and talk to somebody and, ask those tough questions like you're talking about, you're not going to realize, okay, this is the right fit for me. This is kind of where I belong. These guys fit my style maybe a little bit more. So, asking
Yeah.
those questions, I think, is always a good sign when they're
You want
talking
guys,
baseball.
yeah, you want guys that are intrinsically motivated, the ones that are excited to improve and get better and see you as part of that process, not just the guys that are worried about how nice the locker room is or, how many shirts they get or whatever it is. I
Right.
think that's a great point.
I spent a long time at FAU, and I kind of always said, sort of, because we never had the fanciest stuff at FAU. You had a really, really great playing surface, but we never had the fanciest locker room or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I always said, kind of by default, we always got the right kind of player,
Yeah.
because if they were worried about that other stuff, then FAU probably wasn't going to be the choice for them, right? So if they were worried about baseball and getting better and playing in a great culture, then that's where they were going to end up. And so, sort of, just kind of by default, we ended up getting the right kind of kid.
That's awesome. I remember a conversation with Mike Gambino a couple of years ago when he was on, and I noted that when I first talked to him, he said we don't want guys that wanted to go to UVA but couldn't make it, so they chose
Yeah.
BC. We wanted guys that wanted to come to BC. So there's something to be said about being like the first choice.
Right.
So maybe let's reflect back, because you mentioned FAU and you had some coaching roles before that. You've seen pitching change a ton since your first coaching opportunity. But as much as the tech has evolved and you've got internal versus external focus cues and constraint-based training, all this stuff, there are non-negotiables, things that haven't changed when it comes to successful pitching. What do you think are the non-negotiables that have endured across multiple generations?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the makeup, right? Like makeup and the competitive instincts, like those things, they still win. That's still the most important thing. It's probably the most important thing, honestly, is, the guys that can go out there and compete and handle adversity. And, it's funny. It's probably the most important thing, right? Or it's at least one of the most, the makeup, the competitive instincts. And it's the one thing in our game that we really can't measure. We have numbers for everything. We measure everything now, right? And that's the one thing that it's hard to kind of quantify, right? Is like how guys compete and what their makeup is. And it really might be, one of the most important things. I heard somebody say that in an interview, and I was like, God, that's spot on, right? That's the one thing that we can't measure. But so I think that's a big piece. And, strike one, man, strikes, right? Strikes are still going to win. We know more about those strikes now, and we know more about what those strikes look like and where we need to throw those strikes, given each guy's arsenal and everything. But strike one is still huge, right? And being able to pound the zone is still huge and go out there and attack. And so, we have our non-negotiables. I always tell guys, like, when it comes to your delivery, when it comes to your grips, when it comes to your, daily throwing routines, like I want them to have a lot of say in that.
Yeah.
There's, those are things we're going to kind of work through together. When it comes to how you go about your business each day, when it comes to the attention to detail and the focus, and whether it's doing a warm up the right way, or really staying on top of your correctives and your arm care, doing the right things in the weight room, eating right, those are the non-negotiables too on that side of it, right? So how you work, how you go about your business, the attention to detail, all non-negotiable, right? Pounding the strike zone, strikes still win, doesn't matter. All this stuff that's out there now, it's awesome. It's great. Strikes, right?
Yeah.
And then the makeup and the competitive instincts, the heart and the determination, like those things are all, those all stand the test of time, right?
Yeah. Has that made guys harder to evaluate? And the reason I say so is we both know, like, there's like the showcase circuit, right? You're going to get, in your recruiting class, multiple guys who threw in those All-American games, and the games are very conditioned for go out and throw 13 pitches as hard as you possibly can. Some are going to go to the backstop. They're going to spike some 55-foot curveballs just because they want to show high spin. Like it sounds crazy to say, but guys are overused more than ever before at the youngest ages because they're playing for multiple teams, but they're not throwing like 5-inning outings against rivals. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's just a very different like scouting appearance. Has that changed since your early days at FAU when you were going out and trying to see guys?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed, and it doesn't cause you to back away from guys. You just got to look at it a little bit different, and you have guys that are, especially here, we're recruiting guys that are really high profile guys, and they kind of get on that circuit, and it's not anything they're doing wrong. That's just how it is. They have to do these events, and they have to go through in front of these places. And I guess they don't have to, but it is important for them, and so it's a great opportunity for them. So, and that's kind of how it's set up. Like you said, they're going to go throw 1 or 2 innings. They're going to go face 5 batters. But I think in a perfect world, yes, you would love to see those guys compete. And I love if they're in Atlanta and they're throwing in the playoffs and one of the perfect game events or PBR, whatever it is. And it's the playoffs and they're on some backfield somewhere and they got to go toe to toe with another really good travel team. And I want to see that emotion. I want to see that fight,
Yeah.
and, high school baseball's, changed a lot too. But I think, especially, in the past for me, it's always been really important to talk to the high school coach
Yeah.
and try to see them in the high school setting, because that's going to be more of the setting that we're going to see them in, right? When it's the summer circuit, it's kind of travel around, throw any or two here and there. And, when they're here, they're going to be involved in a team and they got to go to school and they got to do some other things. And so it's a little bit more similar to what their life's like in high school. And so being able to see them interact and pitch in the high school setting is, I think, really valuable if you get a chance to do that.
That's huge. And maybe building on that question, we talked about what hasn't changed over the course of this time, but let's talk about the average incoming freshman, right? So, go back to 20 years ago or however long ago, it probably isn't even that long. Like I know I always joke, like we opened CSP in 2007. And if you were a high school lefty that was 88 to 90, you were a top 3-round pick. It was a slam dunk. It didn't matter if you had a secondary offering. You hit 90 as a high school kid, you were state player of the year as a lefty. And fast forward, 7-8 years, we actually had a year when we had like 3 or 4 like 95 mile per hour left-handed arms that were free agents that couldn't get jobs. Like, they were basically being shuffled to indie ball. It was a total difference maker. So I'm curious, what is the average 18-year-old that arrives on campus at Alabama like compared to what you saw in the past?
Well, they're definitely more advanced, right? I mean, they're definitely more advanced, and velo's up everywhere, right? So guys come in with a little bit better, velo and a little bit better stuff. And I think one thing that's really changed a lot that I've noticed is there's so many great facilities out there, and there's so many great coaches at the lower levels now, that the players that I see coming into us have a way better idea of who they are than they did 15 years ago. They're a lot more advanced. They know how they like to move. They know their numbers. They have a good feel for what their warm-up routines look like. They have a good feel for what their weekly throwing, routines look like. And we help them maybe trim some things or add some things and give them those guardrails that we talk about. And we help them along the way. But I just think it's not quite as much of that raw, you get you get those guys where it's like full assembly required. And then you have the guys where it's like very little assembly required, right? It's just get them into a good system and let them go and stay out of their way. And I think guys just come in now and they all have a guy, right? Everybody's got a guy, and they all have a guy back home that they've grown up with, that they've worked with. And, I mean, you guys have kids that have grown up at CSP and they've had the best coaching in the world for their whole time since they've been in 8th grade. And, and there's other great facilities all over the country that we get guys from. And so those guys come in with a lot better foundation. They're way more advanced. And for me as a coach, like, and I would say this to young, don't fight it. Don't fight it. It's great. Like, work with them, and it's so important. Okay, let's sit down, let's talk, let's have a conversation. And probably you've done it before they even get there. You have an idea of where they've been, and but we all want the same thing. We all want them to be great. We all want them to get, become the best version of themselves. Yeah. So it takes a village, and incorporate, somebody that's worked with them for the last 4 years knows them well. And so let's not just say, no, it's my way, it's got to be like this. And I think that's a big thing, right? They all know their data. They all want the data. They all want to talk about it. They're a lot more visual, right? You need to be able to show them stuff and not just tell them stuff. Show them why, right? They want to know why. They want to have a lot of say in their development, which is great. And they really want to know you care, and they don't want sarcasm. They don't want to be, they want just the black and white. Coach, give me the black and white and show me that you care about me, and let's get down to business and let's work. This is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. How are we going to get there?
That's a really good point. I talked to Kevin Erminio, who had been at Kennesaw State for an extended period of time, and then moved on to the Guardians organization. And I think it was 2009, Kevin had a first rounder and then a supplemental pick, which is a big deal for Kennesaw State. It was the best pitching staff they've ever had. And he'd come up and observed at our facility. And he said something to me that has literally stuck out in my mind for over a decade now. He said, I feel like every year I become less of a pitching coach and more a manager of pitchers, meaning these guys are taking such significant steps forward physically that instead of just, teaching grips and executing game plans, it was also a function of like, how do I manage their weekly schedule? How do I protect them from themselves from a volume standpoint? Like, don't get me wrong, pitch calling and sequencing and, pitcher catcher relationships all got more and more important. But I think he just spoke to like the physicality of the game changing so much that, having to protect guys from themselves. And it was probably a lot of what you just reflected on. Like the freshmen are just, they're really, really good.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, sometimes the best thing you do is just set those guardrails and stay out of their way. And I remember, we always do our screens every fall. And, I remember the days of like Cap and Christian Wonders coming up.
Yeah.
And I mean, those guys were, the best. And, but the stuff they would put in there, sometimes it would just say, stay out of his way, leave him alone. Like he's beautiful. And then other guys, it would be this long paragraph of things that we need to do. But just learning how guys move, putting them in a good system. But then also like just showing them that you care, being there for them, being that manager, giving them those guardrails. They all seem to have a good idea now, or a better idea now, of who they are and what their mental blueprint looks like. I always say that that's kind of one of my main jobs, is to give those guys a really good mental blueprint of who they are. Right. I want them to understand their delivery. I want them to understand their strengths, what their arsenal looks like. When they're going good, these are some things that they're doing. When they're kind of getting off the rails a little bit, these are things that get them back on. Really, some simple cues they go to, and I think that's part of our main job, is helping them have that blueprint of who they are, right? And they come in with a little bit more of a foundation than they did 15 years ago, and so that's been really cool to see. And I think a lot of it goes back to the good coaching and the really good facilities and the access to those facilities that these guys have now.
I love it.
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF certified all-in-one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you'll get that special offer.
So, you've had successful in multiple universities now, and you've seen guys that, they're not just getting to pro ball, but also making it to the big leagues. I know we had a fun collaborative project. Shout out to Eric Fago, who was a position player you turned into a pitcher who just signed with the Mets, spent some time at CSP. And so that was cool to see. But I'm curious, what are the characteristics that you see in those guys that roll in as freshmen, whether it was at Alabama or before that at FAU, or before that at Mercer in South Alabama? Like, what differentiates the guys that get to pro ball and don't just make it, but actually have success? What is it that you see in them that allows them to compete at that next level?
I mean, obviously they have they have something that sets them apart from a pure, ability standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's enough fastball. It's a wipeout secondary. It's something that kind of gets them in the door there. And then I think the thing that moves them up that ladder is, when you move up the ladder in pro ball, I think sometimes you got to catch some breaks for sure, but it's also just that being, determined and being relentless, and nothing's going to stop you. And I think those are things that those guys all have. When I look back at all the guys that have kind of made it a long way in pro ball, made it to the big leagues, like they've been able to stay healthy, it's obviously a big piece, but they also just weren't going to be denied. They were going to keep pushing, and no matter how much they got knocked down, they were going to get right back up and keep going. And, I think in some cases they found something, maybe, like I think about Austin Gomber, and, he found that really good breaking ball that kind of pushed him over the edge. Ryan Garten, kind of developed a cutter that just, how are you going to get big league hitters out, right? Like, what are you going to do that gets big league hitters out? And they all sort of had something that maybe pushed them over the edge, but it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, is they all had that heart. They all had that makeup. They all had those competitive instincts. And that's usually what it goes back to. They were all going to attack the strike zone. They're all going to be confident, and they're all going to go out there and pitch with, the right kind of attitude. And I think those things, kind of what maybe set them apart. I was thinking about Ryan Garten when I said his name, and guys that are just absolutely like relentless at what they do. And Ryan, I should have known. I should have predicted Ryan would make it to the big leagues, even as like he was a 6-foot righty that pitched on Friday night for us, and just absolute bulldog competitor. Was drafted late, and and he made it to the big leagues and pitched a little while. And I should have known this when Ryan was like when he was at FAU freshman, sophomore year, we'd come out every day and we do all of our, we do our throwing program and stuff. And Ryan would be like on a different side each day. And I would always like watch him tell his partner, like, no, I'm going to throw on this side today. And he'd say, no, I'm going to throw on this side today. And one day I was like, Rhino, why are you so funny about which side you throw on? And he's like, I have to throw into the wind. I don't want it easy on me. I need to throw into the wind. I think it'll make my fastball better if I can just have something that's pushing against me, And he's looking for every single edge he could get. And so that sort of default mentality, I think, is probably something that as you're pushing through the minor leagues, like you could tell that guy wasn't going to be denied, And I don't know. I just thought about when I said his name. Right?
That's terrific. Yeah. I love that. So a total shift of focus, but at a time where there's still like kind of these siloed approaches, where folks will kind of just stick to their own departments. You alluded to, Cap and Christian, obviously you and Hinckley have talked a lot. You've embraced this synergistic approach where strength and conditioning, sports medicine staff are really heavily integrated with, the skill development and your, obviously role pitching side of things. What made you such an early adopter in this regard, to see the benefit of looking to those realms for assistance when, we both know there was a period where like pitching coaches kind of rolled their eyes about lifting weights and anything that was really more than just, running polls. How do you nurture that partnership across skill coaches and those in this health and performance realm? I know you got one of the best in Brett Price, one of my all-time favorites, CSP intern class of 2015, who's done some great things. What is it that, drives your overarching philosophy in this regard?
I think that we always want to give our guys the very best, right? We always want to do everything we can do and exhaust every resource to make them better. But that's been I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed to be around some really great people. And it started off down at FAU, and, for me, I was always probably kind of tunnel visioned on, hey, the pitching side of things is one thing, what they do in the weight room, something separate. And, it was always about the pitching development and the mechanics and the delivery and the break ball and the grips and everything probably needed to look a certain way. And, just as a young coach, that's kind of how you come up thinking. Right. And, I remember being at a game, this is kind of probably I don't want to say the aha moment, but it was kind of something that's got it going for me I was at a game, 15 years or so ago, I guess. And I was talking with Wes Johnson, and Wes was at DBU at the time. And like we always do, you get to the fifth inning of one of those games and it's 11 o'clock at night at East Cobb, and you start kind of talking shop a little bit more. And he mentioned that he had kind of started doing a lot of FMS stuff with his guys and, doing some kind of screens early on and, some of the things he was finding out by doing that. And I'm like, man, I was kind of drawn to it. And so, I was already good friends with Cap, and I knew he'd be the guy to call. And we had the best gym in the world right there, So that was one of the big things for me is being right there at FAU and having you guys so close. That was, you couldn't ask for a better setup for us. And so I called Cap and I was like, hey man, let me pick your brain on this. And I kind of ran it by him, and he was kind of like, yeah, you idiot. I've been telling you that all along. You need to do something, So I'm like, well, shoot, man, why didn't you just make it happen? So we started kind of teaming up and getting it going. And I remember those days of, kind of hanging out at the gym and having him and Christian come down. And the stuff that was just like, you're learning it just like, it was so much kind of aha. And, how you move in the weight room and how you get power in the weight room is going to be how you move and get power on the mound. And, learning where guys, learning how guys like to move and what their limitations are. And, beating myself up over guys that I was trying to make do something that they're not capable of doing. And I should have been pushing them this direction. And so that kind of opened those doors. And then those doors just keep opening. You start seeing more stuff of like what we can attack from an arm care standpoint, what we can attack from a nutrition standpoint. Now you bring in data and analytics. And Matt, Matt, you talk about Matt Hinckley. Matt's been huge for us, man. I love Matt to death. And I'd probably wear him out. He probably gets sick of my phone calls. I call him all the time, and I know he's got like a million things going on. I'm like, hey, I need 5 minutes, but he's been big for us. And, having that partnership with you guys has taught me a lot. And I think it's kept our guys healthy. It's made them better, here at Bama. And I just said this before, but it really does take a village, right, to help these guys with everything. And we have so many resources here. You're crazy if you don't use them, but to have, me on the field with them, but then you also have Brett in the weight room, Sean Stryker in the training room. We have a superstar in the data and analytics world, Case and Rainey. He does an awesome job for us in that. And they all get it. Right. And we've been fortunate to be together for 6 years now. And so you have some of that continuity, and you have really, it's been a really good mesh. And we try to talk every day, especially in the fall. We try to sit down every day and talk about every pitcher. And sometimes it takes 2 hours and sometimes it takes 10 minutes, but we try to go through each guy and, hey, where are we at here? And, having Brett and his baseball background, and Sean's got a great baseball background. Kaysen knows the right way to make it digestible and not overload guys with some of that, and, how to put it in a good format for them and make it useful. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes with that and get lost. So they all have a good feel for how to manage it. And, understanding that the first thing we want to do is get them moving the right way. The movement's what creates the data, so Kaysen doesn't overstep, and so just all being on the same page and all sitting down and talking each day. Really, I think nothing really falls through the cracks. We're able to stay on top of everything as best we can, and everybody's got one goal in mind, and that's help this guy become the best possible version of himself he can be.
I love that. I think so often, and thank you for the kind words, but so often we get an athlete that walks in, they say, hey, I want to throw like Aroldis Chapman, or I want to throw like Garrett Cole, or, Zach Greinke, or whoever it is. And they try to fit the model to the wrong pitcher. I mean, what they really should be doing is understanding, how do I move? What's unique about me? And then maybe you can go and try to find a model that reflects like, oh, I look a lot more like this guy, and maybe I can backtrack it. And then you roll into some of the data and you see how that guy is trending, when he's good, when he's been bad. And that's some of the stuff that we've really tried to do. And I think, Cap and Christian and Mark early on were really, really great with the brainchild side of things.
For sure.
And now Hinckley's taken it and just understood how to mash all the data so that we can find the comps even better. So
I love them. I mean, all those guys have been really beneficial and have really, really helpful for me over the last 10, 15 years. And
they'd say the same thing about you. They're learning just as much from their conversations with you, I'm sure.
Well, so, they've been huge. They've helped a lot of guys.
So switching gears again, and this is one that's, we could go in a million different directions. So college sports have changed dramatically in the past couple of years, particularly because of the transfer portal, NIL money. What's the good? What's the bad? What's the ugly? You're obviously on the inside. You're probably still feeling it out to some degree, like on the outside is. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of learning how to navigate it, right? And I don't know. We're all learning how to deal with this new world, and I don't know how sustainable it is. Like it really is kind of like the wild, wild west right now, and. There's so much that goes on every day that you don't know, man, is that true? Is that, I don't know, there's no way, but I think there is some good, bad, and ugly, right? And, I think the good is that players aren't stuck in a bad situation, right? They have a chance to go somewhere if they're stuck and they're not held there. They don't have to sit out a year if they want to transfer. And it kind of gives guys the freedom maybe to, get out of a situation where they're sort of stuck. I think the other good piece is that it's kind of a byproduct, but it's really slowed down some of the early recruiting. I haven't watched very many high school games all summer because we've been, kind of tracking transfer portal stuff. And so that, along with some of the new rules, has kind of slowed down some of the early recruiting, which probably isn't a bad thing. Right.
Yeah.
I do think that the NIL stuff and guys having opportunities to help themselves financially, with their name, image, and likeness. I think that's a good thing, especially in baseball with a partial scholarship sport, True. Now, I think that there's times when it might be out of hand, and I don't know if it's really being used in the spirit of the rule and all that.
Yeah.
But, forever we've been, a sport that's always, our players have had to pay a good amount of money to come to school. And so, anything we can, anything that allows them or helps them make it more affordable, I'm all for. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, Now, I do think that, part of the bad, I think that players leaving good situations, right? And like, that's kind of the crappy thing is, there's guys that come in, they've got it really good, and they've got a great relationship with those coaches. And for whatever reason, there might be a better opportunity out there. And maybe they don't even want to leave, but they kind of sort of I don't want to say get talked into it, but I just think guys leave in good situations just because they can, right? It's a hard time.
People
And I
crave
don't,
novelty, right? Like they
right.
want to see
Yeah.
what's out there.
Yeah. Just because they can, right? Just
Yeah.
that's, maybe the grass is greener, right? And I always say the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it, right?
Yeah.
But I think it kind of leads some people to, maybe make some bad decisions in terms of, that part of things. But, and I think that goes back to the other thing of like, as a coach, you got a lot of time invested in these guys.
Yeah.
And you spend a lot of time helping them get through injuries, and you help them get through mental hurdles, right? And there's all sorts of development that goes on, whether it's physical, mental, from a health standpoint, from nutrition. I mean, and we help develop these guys, and I'm not saying we like Alabama, but as a coach, you help develop guys, and then at the snap of a finger, they're gone. And all that time that you spent is just gone. And it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around at times, and so I think that part kind of stinks, a little bit, but there is good and bad. I think the ugly is obviously just the back channeling and the tampering that goes on. Like that stuff is, that's the stuff that we don't, nobody likes that. And, I think that that's kind of a crappy part of it all. And when you bring in money when you make money the king, right? In any venture, right? In business, in whether it's your marriage, whether it's friendship, in anything, right? When you make money the everything, it usually leads to people making some bad decisions, That's a great point. And it usually people maybe compromise morals, right? It just leads to some bad things, right? And it just seems that way, right? Like money is what kind of is the root of all evil, right? Isn't that the old saying? And I see that a little bit in this game, but there is good, there is bad, there is ugly, and we're all sort of navigating through it right now. And you hopefully that the good continues to outweigh the bad as we go forward with it.
Yeah, I've wrestled with it, even just from like a cursory look on the outside. Is it's great if you're that kid that was an excellent high school player and you go somewhere and you're buried, right? You get 6 innings as a freshman, and you're like, all right, well, I can't redshirt now. I want to play baseball. I love the game. I'm not quite good enough to play here. I can't sit out a year and just wash half my college career. Like, I can go and I can transfer down and potentially be a weekend starter somewhere else and like actually develop. So I get it from that perspective. I don't get it from the, I'm already a full ride for whatever reason. But I want an extra $100,000 because I think it's out there for me. Like that's not someone to me who's intrinsically motivated, which is what drives the ship of development. It's just like you said, it's the money drives people down the wrong path.
Right. Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, it's not going to be, it's not a perfect thing. And, we're all trying to work through it as best we can right now. And, kind of is what it is right now. I don't know. It's hard. I think, you look back and you're like, man, of course this, what made us think this was going to be smooth sailing when we did all this, but hopefully we can, find a way to work through it.
Well, it's impacting everybody too. I mean, it's impacting how the amateur draft, is run when players, have, kind of different financial outlooks for college. Like there's some trickle down effects. And like you said, we're still feeling this thing out. So,
you know what, and, and I'm not, and it's hard to be a kid. I mean, it's hard for these players, and I'm not, and I don't begrudge them for this because, I don't know when I was 18 or 19 years old and, you got people in your ear telling you this and offering you this. And it's like, whoa, man, it's, you try to put yourself in their shoes a little bit and you can see where it gets to be a little bit convoluted, it gets a little bit muddy. Right. And, sometimes they need somebody in their corner saying, no, but this is, come on, let's be smart here, So
that's good feedback. We'll keep watching. So, hey, we always wrap up with a lightning round, quick hitter questions, and you can be as detailed as you want in your response.
I've seen this before. Yeah, no, I know these things. I know these.
You're prepped. And you're a voracious reader / self-educator. So what's one book that every player should read?
We started doing like a little book club. That sounds kind of corny, right? I shouldn't even say book club. I need to come up with a tougher name than that. Book club sounds like, it doesn't sound great. But just with our pitching staff, and every Thursday before we go into a weekend series, we'll sit down and meet for 15 minutes or so at the end of practice, and we'll talk about that week's chapter. And I just think that the mental side of the game, we all talk about how important it is, right? And, we talked about it today, like the makeup and the mental side. And that's like the number one thing. That's one of the non-negotiables, right? And
Yeah.
as important as it is, I don't know that we spend enough time on it, and we probably still don't, I'm sitting here talking about things that we do. It's probably still not enough, but you only have so many hours you're allowed to do things. So, we'll sit down for 15, 30 minutes on Thursdays and we'll go through that week's chapter. And I'll use reader documentary is awesome and sort of how it ties in with whatever book we're reading at that time. And, we did the Tom Brady, Man in the Arena, and kind of paired that and just, greatness leaves clues, right? And, seeing how those guys went about things and how they sort of handle some of the stuff that our guys deal with. And so one of the books that we just did was Chop Wood, Carry Water, which I know is a pretty popular one. I think a lot of people have read that one. It's so good. And I'm by no means the smartest person in the world. And, I need easy books like that. And it's a really simple, easy read. And, just kind of about, learning to fall in love with the process of becoming great. And those were easy chapters and very relatable. That's one that comes to mind.
Nice. What about one book for a coach?
Well, I think that they can probably be the both. So Chop Wood, Carry Water, we did that one, a year or so ago, and I thought it was great. This year we did a different book, and I actually really enjoyed this book a lot. And so maybe it is more of the coach book, and I think our players liked it too, but it was Tim Grover's Winning. Yeah. And it's good. Now it's a little bit, it's a little bit of, it's a little bit harsh, right? It's a little bit more of, what it looks like at the, at the highest levels and how nasty and uncivilized it can be at times. And, finding that dark side. And, he kind of gives you a harsh look at what it, what it really is. And he always has some great stories in there about his time with Kobe and Michael and, some of those guys he's worked with. And, that's one that's probably the most recent book I've read. And I really got a lot out of that. I thought it was awesome.
I read that too. It's good kind of just look at sacrifice, and honestly, as I read it, it made me think of a little bit of Trevor Moawad stuff with, it takes what it takes, maybe
takes what it takes, right.
Message was a little softer, but still, I think the message is cute. That's great. If you could go back in time and give a young Jason Jackson advice 20 years ago, as you're getting your coaching career rolling, what would it be?
Well, there's probably a lot of coaching decisions I would tell myself not to do. Like, don't call this pitch. Don't make that bullpen move. When you're in the 8th inning here, they do this, So I'd probably go back and find 100 of those things. I think in general, probably knowing me back then, I would tell myself, listen more, right? Listen to the players more and be a lot more open-minded and be more flexible, right? I try to have a lot of structure, but also a lot of flexibility mixed in with what we do here. And I think 20 years ago, it was more like, hey, this is how we're doing things and we got to do it this way. But listening more, being a little bit more open-minded with everything. And I think those things will serve you well, down the road. And knowing what's ahead of those 20 years, we really see how much the game's grown and how much the pitching side of things has grown. Right. And, I'm just thinking about that, going back to what we talked about earlier with guys and the difference in, 20 years for, talk about 20 years for coaches, but 20 years for players. Just think about how much social media impacts what they do right now. And there's so much out there now and some of it's great. That's one of the first conversations I have with our guys is like, guys, let's talk about navigating pitching Twitter, right? Because there's some really good stuff out there and I love reading it. I love learning about it. There's some things that, maybe that they aren't for us. And there's some things that maybe are for you individually, but not for you. And so I don't want them to shy away from it. I don't want to pretend like it's not there, but let's talk about it. Right. And, so just being open-minded with things that are out there now for me, for players, I think that's probably some advice I would give myself.
That's a really good one. It might lead me to my last question is we have a lot of kids and parents who actually listen to this podcast together. It's kind of on the ride to or from a game or practice. If you could give a bit of advice to the kids, to the parent and one to the parents, what would that bit of advice be?
Well, if I could give, for young players and especially pitchers, and you probably hear this, you probably say this a lot, is just focus on your catch play more. I think that's probably one thing that jumps out is like, man, catch play is the number one thing. Focus on that catch play every day. Spend more time on that. Take time to really develop and stick to your routines, and whether that's a daily routine, whether that's a weekly routine. I think it's so important for pitchers to have routines that they
Yeah.
develop themselves and that they have say in, and then stick to those. It's not going to be an immediate thing. You're not going to see an immediate 5-mile-an-hour jump in velo after 1 week of sticking to this routine. But have a plan, stick to that plan, spend more time and focus on your catch play. Our catch play every day, that's our BP, man. We don't get a chance to throw bullpens every day, but we go through some version of a throwing program every day. And there's a big difference in throwing to get loose versus throwing to get better. And that's where you get better at, is making sure you spend time on that catch play each day. And then for
Absolutely.
the parents, I'd probably say, let the kids enjoy this ride a little bit. Let them be kids, and I do think that there's an aspect of setting some guardrails for them, teach them how to compete, teach them how to handle adversity, give them those really good life lessons. But at the same time, when they get in that car after a game, just I think just telling them that you love them and that you love watching them play, that goes a long way in their development. You don't have to, well, you threw 4 innings and you got hit around today, and the coach from Alabama was there. You don't have to beat up on them too much, and sometimes it's just telling them that you love them, and you got to give them guardrails. You got to teach them how to handle adversity. I think sometimes, if I could give advice to parents, it's not, and this goes back to the transfer portal thing of like, hey, it's not, sometimes they got to get better. It's not somebody else's fault, right? It's not that coach's fault that they had a bad game, and they don't need to transfer to a different travel program just yet. They don't need to leave their high school just yet, right? Like, let's let them work through it, right? Let's let them battle through some adversity. I think that will do them well down the road, right? So I think teaching them how to handle adversity is huge. I think, giving them those guardrails is huge, but also I think telling them, man, I love you and I love watching you play. Sometimes that goes a long way.
I love that. It's a really good key point to wrap up on. You got a Twitter presence. It's at J Jackson Bama. If folks want to check you out and find you there. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time, dude. That was awesome. Really enjoyed everything that we covered, and I'm sure there's a lot of benefits out there for everyone else who tuned in. So thanks again for taking the time to share your expertise.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I think we could probably sit here and talk for 2 more hours if we wanted to, right?
Absolutely. Well, best of luck this summer on the recruiting trail and with camps, and we'll be cheering for you next year as well.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it, man.